and welcome to Week 3 of the NFL Contest Show. I'm your host, Jesse Flynn. Well, what can I say about Week 2 except that I was able to avert a total disaster. Ended up finishing last week at 2-3. Not great, but not terrible because it could have been a lot worse. Also could have been a lot better. I don't normally, lament too much on last week's games, but I gotta admit, I think I drank the Kool-Aid, the Week 1 Kool-Aid, when it came to the Washington Commanders and Carson Wentz and Jameis Winston and the Saints. But the game that really was a kicker was the Baltimore Ravens game. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that in my time betting on the NFL. That was probably one of the worst bad beats I think I've ever taken. But what are you gonna do? Those type of things happen. It was a strange game because I didn't expect Baltimore to jump out to that big of a lead to begin with. But sitting at after Week 2, sitting at 5-5 right now, so 500. It's not terrible, but it's not great. Definitely got to step it up this week, particularly after having such a disappointing Week 2. But those are the breaks. You're gonna have bad weeks in this tournament. You just got to shake it off and move on to the next one. And it's Week 3. The lines are a lot better this week. It's definitely a lot tighter. There's no double-digit favorites. There's only one team that's getting a touchdown, and everything else is 6.5 or below. A couple of pick'em games, so certainly a little bit easy, harder to find winners maybe, but you don't really have those big spreads where you're worried about that backdoor cover as much as you might have been with the double-digit favorites we had last week, and we saw a couple of them come through in the end. Not winning the game, but actually covering the spread. So we've got a little bit different selection of games this week, and I do have my 5 that I like. One of the games, the one I'll give last, is a lean right now because I'm recording this on Thursday and I'm still waiting on the injury report, but I'll get more into that when I get to that game. So Week 3 is upon us. And that means it's time to get our selections for the Circa Millions. So let's get to it. And these are my 5 games that I like for Week 3 of the NFL contest. So the first game that I like is the San Francisco 49ers -1.5 going to Denver to take on the Broncos. This game flipped. I initially got it at +2, San Francisco +2 when it first came out on Sunday. And then, after the Jimmy G switch, that line's actually dropped now to where San Francisco is the favorite -1.5. But I still like them. I mean, it's basically a coin flip game. A lot of NFL games are not decided by 1 point, so I'm not really worried about laying the 1.5. And I just think San Francisco is just a better team. Whether it was Trey Lance or Jimmy G, I just think they're a better overall team. They're healthy right now. Obviously, with the loss of Trey Lance, Jimmy G comes in, but he's probably the best backup quarterback in the NFL. He's obviously a quarterback that's led this team to Super Bowls and NFC Championship games, so plenty of experience. He knows the offense. He knows the players. It looks like San Francisco will be getting George Kittle back, which is a big boost to their passing offense. They may have lost one of their defensive tackles, Tyron Armstead, I believe, but they have such a deep bench when it comes to their defensive line that they should be able to sustain losing one of their players. And with the Denver Broncos, I don't know what to think of this match between Nathaniel Hackett and Russell Wilson, and getting accustomed to this new offense as a new first-time head coach is getting used to being the head coach and the play caller on offense, because last week we saw a lot of clock management issues just like we saw in Week 1, and we saw them, with delay of games and not being, up to the line with only a few seconds to go and not really being ready for the play to start. And it just looks like they're still in that beginning phase of getting adjusted to all the new things that are with this Broncos team, and I just think that you got a better coach in Kyle Shanahan. Russell Wilson hasn't really looked all that great, so the quarterback position is probably a wash. Running backs, about the same. It's about a wash, though Kyle Shanahan there certainly schemes up a good running game plan. And then the wide receivers, looks like Jerry Jeudy might be out for Denver, so I would certainly lean to San Francisco on that side. And then when it comes to the defense, it looks like Denver may be down a couple of their secondary players. Some of their safeties look like they're banged up, and cornerbacks. So they may be down a couple of players, and that's just going to make more opportunities for guys like Debo and Ayuk and Jennings and Kittle if he certainly does play. We know last year Jimmy G led the league in yards after catch. So Kyle Shanahan knows get the ball out of his hands quickly, get it into the hands of his playmakers, and let them do what they do. I just think that this sets up really well for San Francisco. Kyle Shanahan historically has been much better against the spread on the road than he is at home, so I certainly like that. It's a primetime game, so they got a little bit of extra rest, and I just think San Francisco's the better team. I had them making the playoffs, though I did have Denver making the playoffs, but I didn't expect there to be this much learning curve with Russell Wilson learning the new offense and a new coach learning to be a head coach and offensive coordinator. So I just think all the things in this lineup for San Francisco, I really like their chances of winning this game. And since it's only -1.5, it's basically win the game and they'll cover the spread. So for my first pick, give me the San Francisco 49ers -1.5. So the second game that I like is the Chicago Bears -2.5 at home taking on the Houston Texans. I'm not ready to throw the towel in on Justin Fields. I know they didn't cover the spread against Green Bay. They did win their first game against San Francisco, which is a very good defense, though that game was played in a monsoon, so the weather certainly had a factor in that. But that game last week, although they did not throw the ball very well, Chicago was able to run the ball really well. I think that's something they're going to lean on going into this game. They're going to definitely try to use more of that play action off of the passing. And, last week they were playing the Green Bay Packers, one of the better defenses in the NFL, and they were on the road in prime time, first game at home, so the crowd was super hyped for that game. And then obviously you've got Aaron Rodgers over there, and he's not going to let you make too many mistakes. And they honestly, he didn't really have that great of a game. They ran the ball much more than they did throw the ball in that game. But as much as the Chicago Bears defense gave up a lot of rushing yards to that Green Bay team, Damian Pierce and Rex Burkhead are not Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. And Green Bay last week, they got two of their starting offensive linemen back before that game started, going into that game that missed week 1. So, they were like at full strength as far as their running game was concerned, and they showed it. But Houston Texans, they don't have that type of skill position players. So I don't expect them to be able to run the ball that much against Chicago. And Chicago's been quite stout against the pass in their first 2 games. So their defense is pretty good. I'm kind of concerned about Roquan Smith, so I'm keeping an eye on the injury report. But once again, I'm still not convinced that Justin Fields is not going to be a capable quarterback in this league. I just think he's got a new head coach. He's learning a new offense. He's only a second-year quarterback, and he's got young skill position players around him. So they've just got to get more playing time and more reps. And now that they're heading into the 3rd game of the season, I think this offense will start to open up a little bit more. And then, Houston, they tied the first game of the season 2020, but that was an odd game against a Colts team that I didn't really think was very good to begin with, and they showed that last week getting shut out against Jacksonville, though they were missing about half of their starters to injury. I don't think Texans are that good. They only scored 9 points against Denver last week, even though they only gave up 16. I think that had as much to do with the ineptitude of the Denver play calling and coaching and a lot of other things that are going on over there as much as it did with Houston's defense. So, they're going. Houston's played. This will be back-to-back road games. They played in Denver last week. Now they've got to go up to Chicago, play outdoors in the weather. It's supposed to be windy, which is going to make it difficult for Davis Mills, to throw the ball. And I just think with Chicago being able to lean more on the run and their defense being pretty good against the run, I think this limits the Houston Texans' ability to score. And it's only -2.5. I could see this being a field goal game. So being under that field goal, I'm confident that the Chicago Bears being at home, having the crowd behind them, and again, this being the third game of the season, I expect Justin Fields to take a little bit more of a step as far as his passing is concerned, and be more in a rhythm with his wide receivers. And then again, I think they're going to run the ball, more than they have in the past games to try to open up the play action for their quarterback and try to take some shots down the field. So I just think with them being at home under a field goal, Texans are a bad team. They really haven't shown me anything in some of these other games. They're an indoor team, a dome team. They only scored 9 points when they played outdoors last week in Denver, and the weather is probably supposed to be even worse in Chicago this week. So all these factors lining up for Chicago makes me think they've got an opportunity to win this game. So for my second pick, give me the Chicago Bears -2.5. So the third game that I like is the Dallas Cowboys heading to MetLife Stadium to take on the New York Giants. This game's a pick'em, so win it and cover the spread. And I just think that the Cowboys, they're an overall better team than the New York Giants. I mean, yes, the New York Giants are 2-0, but they're a very lucky 2-0. Last week, they got 2 turnovers to start the game against the Carolina Panthers, and all they could muster was a field goal from those 2 turnovers inside their, I think their own 25-yard line, and they ended up winning that game by 3 points. I think that the Dallas Cowboys, particularly on defense, are a very good team. They're still very healthy on that side of the ball. They still have all their skill position players. They're supposed to be getting, except for Dak Prescott, obviously, and they're supposed to be getting back Michael Gallup this week. So that's another added weapon to their arsenal. And with Cooper Rush as their quarterback, I mean, this is a guy who's been on this team for like 5 or 6 seasons. So he knows the offense. He knows the players. He knows the facilities. He knows what's going on with this team. He's run the scout team and probably took reps with the first team before. So these players know him, and he showed that with his chemistry with Noah Brown last week. And I think they could just build on that. One of the things he didn't do last week is he didn't turn the ball over, and that's a very important factor for a backup quarterback, because they need to lean on their defense and lean on the run game, and he needs to make plays when he needs to make plays, but Cooper Rush is not going to be asked to win the game for this Dallas Cowboys team. Now with the New York Giants, once again, they are a very lucky 2-0 team. Daniel Jones hasn't really been that great, particularly in the red zone. They've gotten some yards between the 20s, but when they get down there into the scoring zone, they seem to run out of fuel, run out of gas, and they have to settle for field goals. And I just don't think that's a winning formula. I think that the New York Giants fans' hopes of going 17-0 are going to get squashed this week. I really like Dallas in this game. Last week they only had 5 penalties, which was like a good sign for this team that maybe they're finally starting to clean up their act a little bit, because they're typically one of the more heavily penalized teams in the league, and it often costs them in important parts of the game. So if they can keep that up, keep the penalties down, keep the turnovers down, rely on their defense, rely on the running game, let Zeke be the hammer, and let Tony Pollard, come in, and once the defense has been softened up, let him come in there and try to bust off one of his longer runs. Looks like the New York Giants defense has got quite a few players on the injury report right now, particularly in their secondary and a few of their defensive linemen and linebackers. So definitely have to keep an eye on that. But because if I think that'll definitely help the Dallas Cowboys if they're going against a bunch of backups on defense. I think that, and if they're thin, on that side of the ball, I think them running the ball eventually could wear them down and allow the Dallas Cowboys to get the victory here. I really like their chances in this one. And again, since it's just to pick them, all they've got to do is win the game. Now, I'm typically not a fan of Mike McCarthy, but in this instance, going up against Dable, I think he's getting a lot of love for the 2 wins to start the season. But again, he is still a first-time coach, and they've been very fortunate in those first 2 games. So with Dallas' experience, Dallas' defense, Dallas' running game, I think it'll be enough, and Cooper Rush will be able to get just enough done to get the Cowboys the victory. So for my third pick, give me the Dallas Cowboys as a pick'em. So the fourth game that I like is the Atlanta Falcons heading up to Seattle to take on the Seahawks. This game, again, is a pick'em, so win and cover the spread. And I just think Atlanta overall is a much better team than Seattle is, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. Marcus Mariota has actually been playing quite well. They should have won the first game against New Orleans, and he gave them an opportunity to win last week against L.A. Their running game, Cordell Patterson, I think Arthur Smith's, got this run scheme going, and he seems to be thriving in it. Drake London starting to show the reason why he was a first-round pick at wide receiver. And Kyle Pitts hasn't really been the focal point of the offense yet, but he's due for a breakout game, and this could be that game because the Seattle Seahawks linebacking core isn't the best, and I just think that they're really susceptible to seam plays and plays over the middle by the tight end, and I just think that Atlanta, even though they're going into Seattle in what can be a hostile environment there in that 12th man in that stadium, they did stay on the West Coast. They've been practicing at the University of Washington, so after the game in LA last week, they just stayed out on this side of the country, and so the team hasn't had any outside distractions. They're just practicing and going back to their hotels. So I think that's a good bonding experience for this team. And after the 2 heartbreaking losses that they've had to start the season, I think they're going to finally get their first win of the year. With Seattle, particularly on offense, Geno Smith showed me who Geno Smith was last week. I had zero confidence in him. I actually was on San Francisco last week, and I used them in some fantasy lineups and got plenty of points for them, basically shutting out the Seattle offense. Their running game is not very good. The offensive line looks pathetic. The only good thing they have is DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and maybe their tight ends, but Geno Smith is not the quarterback to exploit those players' skills. And Atlanta's defense has been playing okay. I mean, they've gone up against the Saints and the Rams, 2 teams that are pretty loaded on the offensive side of the ball, and they held their own against both teams. Their defensive line is getting after the quarterback. They're finally getting some sacks on the quarterback. They've created a few turnovers. AJ Terrell, their defensive back, is really starting to shine as a potential all-pro player. And I think Arthur Smith has got this team going in the right direction. Again, it's a pick'em, so they've just got to win the game. I just think overall, Atlanta is a much better team in the important phases of the game, the running department, quarterback, defense. So I just think that Atlanta has a real good opportunity to get their first win of the season, even though they're playing in Seattle. I like the fact that they stayed on the West Coast. It gives them a lot more time to focus on their team unity, which I think will be a good motivating factor going into this game, as they're sitting at 0-2 right now, and no team wants to be on the West Coast for 2 weeks and come back without a victory. So for my fourth pick, give me the Atlanta Falcons as a pick. So the fifth game that I like is the one that may or may not make the card. This is really depending on the injury report for this game, because there's some injuries to one team that if certain players aren't going to play, I think this really makes the other team a little bit more of a chance to win this game. So right now, the team that I'm going with, if the injury reports come out on Saturday that certain players are playing, I may drop this game. If I do, I'll be sure to put it in the comments before I submit my picks. Otherwise, I'll just be sticking with this team. So for my fifth game, I'm going with the Miami Dolphins plus 5.5 at home, taking on the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills right now, their stock probably couldn't be higher after their blowout win against Tennessee. They've looked great the first two games of the season. They've looked like the Super Bowl favorite that they were before the season started. But, with the LA game, they obviously had the preseason leading up to that game. And then with the Tennessee game, they had extra time to prepare because they played the Thursday game to start the season. Now they're after playing Monday night, they've got to play on short rest, going on the road against a division opponent, and they're facing a dilemma because they've got several key DBs from their defense on the injury report. Dane Jackson, who we saw leave in an ambulance, thankfully he's okay, but he had a neck injury, so he won't be playing this week. And then their two all-pro safeties, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, are both on the injury reports and haven't practiced with neck injuries. So with Buffalo, they play the highest percentage of 5 defensive backs of any team in the NFL. And if they're missing both of their all-pro safeties and a cornerback, and they're already missing Tre'Davious White, that's really going to put a lot of stress on some of their rookie players, as well as guys they're going to have to call up from the practice squad. And why that's such an important thing is we saw what Miami can do with this offense once they get going. They're basically showing up with a 4x100 track team, and what they're doing is they're literally wearing out their opponent's defensive backs by making them run all game long. I believe I read somewhere last week that the cornerbacks for Baltimore ran almost 7,000 yards in that game. So they were just worn out, and by the fourth quarter it showed because they were blown coverages. They weren't able to keep up with with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I mean, you just saw them running wide open in that comeback win by Miami. Now, I know Miami's getting a lot of love, particularly Tua, because of that comeback. I was on Baltimore last week, so that really hurt to watch that game the way it unfolded. But it also brought to my attention just how dynamic this offense can be once they have their opponents in a vulnerable position, and that's usually late in the game when they're tired, and now they've got to try to chase around two of the fastest players in the NFL. Buffalo's offense has looked dynamic. Obviously, Josh Allen's looked great. Stephon Diggs has looked great. The running game's been sufficient. But they're going up against the Miami team that's defense is also pretty good. I mean, they gave up a bunch of yards and some deep shots to Baltimore last week, but this week I think they're getting Xavier Howard back, their all-pro defensive back. So that's going to help out with them trying to slow down Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis and maybe make Josh Allen try to beat him with his legs and try to force him into some mistakes. And again, we saw last week that this Miami offense is never out of it. And they're at home. They're playing in South Florida, so it's going to be hot and humid. And they're getting 5.5 points. And I like the fact that they're getting well over a field goal because I believe this could be a backdoor cover. Even if Miami doesn't eventually win this game, they still have the ability to get in there and sneak and cover the spread on this game. It's division opponents. These teams know each other. Buffalo's had the upper hand in the last couple of seasons, but this is a new Miami team. They've got a lot of lethal weapons on offense. They got a new head coach who's got a scheme going that he believes in, and I just think that with everything compounding on top of Buffalo over the last couple of weeks, playing in prime time 3 weeks in a row, the injuries, the lack of preparation time because they're playing on a short week, and they're having to go from Buffalo down to South Florida and play in that brutal humidity in Miami, I think all those factors are going to lead Miami to an opportunity to win this game. We know they can put up points, so I believe this will be a shootout. If you want to bet the over in this game, I would certainly wait to see where it ends, but I think there's going to be a lot of points scored in this game. But I just believe that Miami, with their offensive capabilities, are never going to be out of it. And with 5.5 points at home, it's just too much to give to a home division rival. So for my fifth and final pick, give me the Miami Dolphins plus 5.5. So those are my 5 picks for Week 3 of the NFL season. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Head on over to deadmoneymedia.com to subscribe to our email so you can get all of our content, and you can go over and check out some of the merch that we got and help support the channel. But now it's the Dead Money Media Contest Parlay Week 3. We haven't hit one yet, but due for one of those 5-0 weeks, and I think this might be that week. So for the Dead Money Media Week 3 Parlay, my picks are the San Francisco 49ers minus 1.5, the Chicago Bears minus 2.5, the Dallas Cowboys as a pick'em, the Atlanta Falcons as a pick'em, and even though I like Miami to potentially win this game, this week I'm going to take the point. So give me Miami plus 5.5. If you put those 5 together, it comes out to roughly 24-1. So certainly would be a great payday. Also would be a great time to get a 5-0, get myself above 500 and back into contention for potentially the first quarter prize, and maybe keep myself in the running to try to win that overall $1 million prize. Well, it's week 3. I hope everybody has a great week. I hope you win a lot of bets. I hope you make a lot of money, and have a great weekend. Thanks for watching.